Kony 2012 is everywhere. I tried to stay quiet, I tried to let the discussion happen, and I just hoped something good would come of it. Recently, however, this discussion has turned into slander. Slander against the organization Invisible Children and against foreign aid in Uganda. I'm here to try to get people to really research these issues. I have recently found a report on a UN Security Council meeting held on November 14th, 2011 that no one has mentioned in any discussion I've seen that sheds some light on the sudden surge in motivation to get Kony and the LRA. In this report, the Security Council demands immediate halt to all attacks by the Lord's Resistance Army in Central Africa, insisting on disarming combatants. The military operations by affected states should be intelligence-driven and ensure containment, not dispersal, of the LRA. But before I get into that, first I'll say a couple facts I've managed to find with sources, if anyone is really interested. 1. Kony hasn't been active in Uganda in 6 years. This is true. 2. There's only around 500 LRA soldiers reportedly still active. Again, fact. 3. 2.5 billion barrels of crude oil were found in Uganda in 2009. 4. However, the UN is calling to strengthen the mobilization of support by the international community for future action in the area. 5. 100 U.S. advisors, not troops, although they are combat equipped, have been sent to Uganda to help aid the surrounding areas in gathering intelligence on the LRA. 6. Amnesty, as well as repatriation and reintegration of former combatants, is being pursued by the Ugandan government in order to put child soldiers back into society. 7. 54% of Americans surveyed didn't know Sudan was a country in Africa. Of course, people don't know where Uganda is. As a whole, our society knows nothing of the outside world. Let's face it. We live in a blissful ignorance over here. 8. The 37% of donations going to the cause is calculated when dividing direct services over the total expenses. That's a very misleading interpretation of the organization. Now to explain. Kony and the LRA have not been active in Uganda since 2005, when the International Criminal Court issued 5 arrest warrants for senior LRA leaders, including himself. But the LRA has been active in neighboring countries, such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, Sudan, and more recently the Central African Republic. According to the first report of the Secretary General on the activities of the United Nations Regional Office for Central Africa, filed on November 10th of 2011, in March of 2009, the LRA is believed to have fragmented into several mobile groups in a wide area, with an estimated 500 combatants. National security forces of the affected countries continued to conduct military operations against the LRA, significantly reducing the strength and capacity of the armed group over the last 3 years. Still, the LRA continues to pose a serious threat to civilians due to the limited capacity of the national security forces. The report also notes that between January and August, they received 254 separate reports of attacks on civilians, which left 126 dead, 368 abducted, and an estimated 440,000 persons internally displaced or living as refugees. This was in 7 months, and this was last year. The LRA is still active and is still doing a lot of damage to the area, and the UN is highlighting the United States' commitment of military personnel to work with the affected states to make a final push to end the problem. Before I go any further into that, oil was found in Uganda. Yes, good point. I have nothing to argue against that. But to be frank, I believe that's an entirely different conversation. Yeah, this is the main point I see people using against this campaign and the push to end the LRA. I look into these phony 2012 videos being posted and the articles they post. The vast majority of the sources used to try and prove this point aren't capable of proving anything beyond the idea that oil does in fact exist in Uganda, and that some political analysts think that that is the reason why we're there. After this, the argument gets rather intentionally misleading. The jump is made that Invisible Children is a front for the U.S. getting oil from Uganda. Invisible Children have been in Uganda since at least 2006, speaking out against the LRA, and then the idea that oil discovered 3 years later being their motivation is pretty unlikely. It seems more likely that a false connection is being drawn between the two events. The U.S. government wants oil, which is actually highly likely a large part of the motivation behind sending the troops, besides the UN support I noted earlier and will support later. The group Invisible Children is an activist organization that focuses less money on direct aid and more on advertising awareness. These two may be interrelated through circumstance in Uganda, but the Stop Kony 2012 supporters seem to indicate that they have a cause and effect relationship that does not exist. I can't justify or even really speculate on government motives, but do not mix up a good cause with a vague potential government intention. I do, however, have some information that might persuade you into actually thinking the U.S. is there to help. I know. It's crazy, right? People looking out for one another in this day and age. Insane. Anyway, Like I said, I've taken the liberty to look up a UN Security Council report from November 14th of 2011, a very credible source I might add, and it states, the Security Council commends efforts by the European Union, the United States, and other donors to provide humanitarian assistance to LRA-affected populations in CRA, DRC, and Sudan. The Council stresses the need for an enhanced, comprehensive, and more regional approach to the humanitarian situation, including assistance to victims of sexual violence and other attacks, and reiterates the requirement for all parties to promote and ensure safe and unhindered access for humanitarian organizations to the civilian population. The Council calls upon the international community to provide support to capacity building, good governance, and humanitarian efforts in LRA-affected areas. This is why the sudden push, and this is why the video is released now, and this is why they want to raise awareness in the next month and end this particular conflict. Now is the time to do it with the UN support. This is not for oil. Invisible Children isn't a government front for their oil wars, and this report makes it clear that the LRA needs to be stopped, as well as addressing other humanitarian issues in Central Africa before that area can develop further. The report also states that the Security Council commends the important efforts undertaken by the militaries of the CRA, the DRC, Sudan, and Uganda to address the threat posed by the LRA, and urges those militaries to coordinate and concert their efforts to apprehend Joseph Kony and the LRA top commanders in the coming months and bring them to justice. The Council welcomes efforts by the international community to enhance the capacity of regional militaries to conduct effective operations against LRA top commanders and better protect civilians. It notes, for example, the efforts by the United States to work with regional militaries. The Council underlines the need for all action against the LRA to be conducted in compliance with applicable international humanitarian, human rights, and refugee law. Here's the information that you Phony Kony people have been looking for. I'm not sure why it took everyone so long with their amazing researching skills. Here's a couple quotes I pulled out of the article supporting my case. You can't tell me that all these UN officials are out for oil too. Charles Armel Dubain from the Central African Republic said that when speaking about transnational challenges, he pointed to the bloodshed experienced in 2008 in several villages from the LRA. Now, those populations live in precarious situations with thousands of refugees. The insecurity created in the region only reinforces pervading poverty and it posed great difficulties for his country in its current fragile post-conflict period. Currently, there are 3 platoons to track such ambushes, and those are not sufficient. One unit of the Ugandan forces is carrying out joint patrols. He welcomes recent efforts to take concrete and coordinated action to find mutual solutions to common challenges. His country appreciated the recent involvement of France and the United States, which had already shown positive effects in the region. He would be even more pleased if other partners would join ranks in the just fight being pursued by his country. The people of his country faced many challenges, including peace and security, due to the LRA. Commitment of forces and resources was needed to act together to prevent the LRA from carrying out crimes with impunity. Now that's really peculiar. A UN delegate from an affected country welcomes more foreign aid. Who was it that said they don't want us there? Probably someone living in the suburbs. Unfortunately, there's no quote from a Ugandan delegate in the report, but their efforts are commended numerous times throughout, and the general tone of the UN report was positive towards foreign aid. Read it for yourself. It's all in there. Joy Agwu, probably pronounced that wrong, from Nigeria, said the LRA's devastating impact on the region could not be underestimated. While the LRA has been weakened over the years, its effects remain unhindered. Since December 2008, the LRA has killed about 3,000 people and displaced thousands more. To overcome that threat, resource and other constraints must be addressed, and cooperation and coordination in information sharing must be built. She urged that more also be done to enhance regional efforts. The current planning team should be complemented with the establishment of the Regional Intervention Force, while commending the United States for leading efforts to counter LRA-sustained bilateral and multilateral support was imperative, including the provision of humanitarian assistance in affected areas. Also, Jeffrey De Laurentiis, a United States delegate, said the LRA was one of the most brutal terrorist organizations on the planet. Its leader, under indictment by the International Criminal Court, continued to hold hundreds of abductees hostage, forcing them to loot, rape, and kill. The United States has sent a small number of its military personnel to act as advisors to regional militaries pursuing the LRA. The United States forces would not engage in direct action against the LRA, but would be equipped for self-defense. The United States would work with the Central African Republic, Uganda, South Sudan, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as with the African Union and the United Nations, to make a final push to end the long-standing problem. Finally, Mr. Musa, Special Representative of the Secretary General and head of the United Nations Regional Office for Central Africa, said it was crucial that the international community remain engaged in this important issue. Military operations being conducted by the effective member states should be intelligence-driven, targeted, and ensure the containment rather than the dispersal of LRA elements in order to maximize their impact, and recent deployment by the United States of 100 combat-equipped military personnel to provide training and advisory support to national armies in regions should enhance efforts already being undertaken by governments of the affected countries. They don't want to hunt down and kill the remaining LRA members in Kony. They want to find them, bring leaders to justice, and try to give these children some shot at life. The report states the government of DRC has repeatedly called for the withdrawal of all foreign troops deployed to fight the LRA, except those involving information gathering. The High Court of Uganda commenced in July the trial of former LRA commander Thomas Kwoyelo, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, and in September granted amnesty to 26,130 suspected LRA and other armed group combatants, further proving that on a world stage they are looking to remove the leaders from the picture and allow the children to come home. Some people have also begun to use slander, like saying most of these supporters can't point out Uganda on a map, to try and belittle the movement and its followers, when they themselves probably didn't even know where Uganda was until it flashed by in one of the videos. Trust me, I know a couple people. It's a fact. Let's face it, hardly anyone stays informed these days, and trying to pretend like we're all experts after reading a few personal blogs and jaded news articles is ridiculous. I'm just trying to provide actual facts and not just what some conspiracy theorists can think up in their basement. I'm not an expert by any means, and I welcome any response videos or comments, as I would love to actually have a healthy debate on this and not a heated argument of one side calling the other side stupid. I welcome the conversation, and I commend people for actually doing some form of research. I'll address a few other things really quickly now. You are correct if you feel we should have cared earlier. You are very correct in saying there are other bigger issues out there. You are certainly correct to try to get people to understand the entire truth behind the decision they are making and what's going on in the area. Where I think you are incorrect lies in your delivery. I think you are actually the ones making this into a smaller issue than what it is. This video was to raise awareness on the issues, and now the conversations have started. The UN report clearly states the LRA is a major issue in that area, so don't try to think they don't need our help because of what other Americans have said. I also think that you are very wrong for attacking people as sheep for promoting awareness, and not yourself researching your own sources. Alex Jones is far from credible. I'll even call him batshit crazy right now. And listening to Kony himself on a video denying his crimes, a proven war criminal, is like listening to Bill Clinton denying getting a Hummer. I do, however, like that you've gone through the effort to investigate both sides of the story before drawing your conclusions, and I have to thank the Phony Kony supporters for presenting people with information they were previously lacking or did not have the effort to look up themselves, even if some of it was distorted. Never stop this type of critical thinking and investigative researching, and I urge people to continue to stay motivated about world issues. These types of discussions are healthy and better our society as a whole. Finally, I'll address this financial issue really quick, even though the Invisible Children released a video about it themselves explaining everything. The 37% number fails to include figures such as direct support expense, fees and licenses, rent, transportation, utilities, and not to mention actual production costs that makes the company operate. It's still a business. Even if they're not for profit, they have bills to pay to stay above water in order to continue helping people. The statements were even audited by an independent auditor, Considine and Considine. In fact, the company only spends about $1.4 million on compensation over 43 employees. That amounts to around a $30,000 yearly salary per employee on average. The majority of the money does go to filmmaking, building awareness, and operating expenses, but that's the whole point. The organization is a lobbying effort. They didn't hide it in the video. I don't know why people say they did. It wants people to write senators, congressmen, celebrities, to try and build support for the cause. It knows that doing that is way more valuable than sending an extra $50,000 to Uganda. They raise awareness and spark interest in people that normally would know nothing of these issues. The Invisible Children wrote as their aim to follow the LRA wherever they go, through early warning radio networks, educating local communities, search and rescue teams, providing rehabilitation services, and promoting the arrest of Joseph Kony. This is what they have done with their funds and their videos. The organization is very transparent. Lastly, a good deal of the money they earn from donors is restricted to be used on Schools for Schools campaign for building schools in Central Africa, not Uganda, Legacy Fund, scholarships aimed at Central Africa, not Uganda, and grants in which the charity that donates gets to specify what exactly the money is used for. based on the evidence, I'm still comfortable giving the organization a little money to help promote awareness of the need for charitable contributions. And worst case scenario, I'll be out $25. I probably would have bought weed with anyway. So to wrap it up, I'm a Kony 2012 supporter. This is an awareness campaign to get people woken up to what is happening outside of their own countries, and is doing just that. They use old footage and use Uganda's past as an example of what's going on in the surrounding countries by the remaining LRA. The U.S. military is aiding the Ugandan military because they actually want to stay out of combat and just provide training. Uganda is the safest place to do that. Kony isn't there. The worst that can happen from this campaign is Kony escapes somehow and we all end up with some cool posters and t-shirts. What will really come from this is raised awareness of world issues and hopefully raised hunger in the younger generation to find out more, research issues, and discuss things like this on a more frequent basis. The leaders of the first world need to work together to end third world strifes. It's the only way things will balance out. I urge people to keep educating themselves and find out the real answers to issues and not just what you're told. Kind of ironic, isn't it?